China has created a so-called unreliable entities list targeting foreign entities that do not comply with market rules, violate the spirit of contract, block or cut supplies to Chinese firms with non-commercial purpose. This follows the recent White House decision to place Huawei, the Chinese telecom giant, on a similar list, blocking it and its affiliates from doing businesses with American companies. What does it mean to be on the Chinese list? How would it impact foreign businesses operating in China, especially American businesses? And how seriously could it impact trade relationship between the world's two largest economies? I'm joined in the studio beside Tim Stratford by Jing, an attorney at the AnJie Law Firm, and also via satellite from Philadelphia, Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies. So, gentlemen, welcome to The Point. And there you go, Brandon. I will go to Brandon in just a moment, but first of all, let's explain a little bit what this list really is about. As I said, it's for those foreign entities that do not comply with the market rules, that violate the spirit of contract, that block or cut supplies to Chinese firms with non-commercial purpose. Mr. He, what does it mean? Help us with some simple languages, please.
I think right now there are not many details have been announced by the government, but it's quite clear that the government intends to make sure if any companies who violate the contract, breach the contract, fail to supply what they need to supply to the Chinese companies, if there's a reason to believe they do this, really out of the consideration, non-commercial considerations, the government consider that's not a reliable entities, not friendly to Chinese companies. The details have not been set out yet.
Yeah. So here it says foreign entities, so it can be American, it can be German, it can be Japanese, or but
right.
Does it matter where they operate? I mean, does it have to be in China or somewhere else or overseas? Do we know any details about that?
I think right now it's very broad. It does not, impose any restrictions on the kind of the subject or target.
Yeah. What does the non-commercial purpose mean? So whatever these companies have done, either violate the spirit of contract, block or cut supplies, what does with non-commercial purpose mean? So for political reasons or?
Looks like that's probably one of the major causes the unreliable entities are targeting at. Normally for business entities, they breach a contract, they fail to deliver for the normal course, commercial reasons. But if there are other considerations that may be considered out of the other motivations or some government dictations from foreign governments, that might be considered as a non-commercial.
At this moment, I know it's a very dangerous game to play, but can we say, for instance, Google, which has cut its supply to the Chinese company Huawei, is Google potentially a candidate on this list? I mean, Tim.
Well, I think there's a lot of concern. American companies and other companies, because of Huawei being put on the U.S. list, now they'll be subject to criminal sanction in the U.S. if they sell products and technology to Huawei, subject to very narrow restrictions. So American companies and other companies that have American technology, they have to take this very, very seriously. And if they will be retaliated against in China for following U.S. law, then it puts the companies in a very, very difficult situation.
Yeah. What was your first reaction upon hearing this news? I mean,
well, the reaction is, I mentioned before that the commercial relationship is the propeller and ballast. But right now, things that are happening on both sides are increasing the risk and uncertainty of American companies doing business with China and Chinese companies doing business with the United States. And so we feel like the ballast is being thrown overboard. And the more that actions like this take place, companies have to mitigate their risk. AmCham did a survey a couple of weeks ago, and we found that 45% of the members, and this included AmCham in Shanghai as well, 40% of the members have either moved or are considering moving manufacturing outside of China. And so the more the uncertainty is, the more this kind of activity is going to continue, and it's not going to be reversed very easily.
So basically you're saying this list, the Chinese list, will make life even more difficult for the American businesses, which are already facing a lot of uncertainty.
It increases uncertainty, and responsible managers of businesses have to take steps to reduce their risk. And in many cases, that's finding another solution besides manufacturing or sourcing in China.
Mr. He, again, did the Chinese government must have calculated very carefully. They must know what kind of consequence there will be if they set up such a list. What do you think would be on the mind of the Chinese government when they announce such a list, knowing this is going to make life even more difficult for the American businesses here?
Yeah, I think the government clearly understands the consequences, and they understand this puts the companies in a very, very difficult, challenging situations. But I think that I'm guessing the government officials are trying to make a fine distinction between someone doing this in bad faith or in good faith. Okay, for some company they have to comply with the law, then they have to withdraw some certain contract. And I guess, I'm hoping the government really would not punish those companies. Probably the government right now probably more looking at, hey, whether some companies go out of bounds, do something which they shouldn't have done. And plus, probably I'm thinking the unreliable entity list is probably more for deterrence purposes.
Deterrent.
And the actual enforcement is going to be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Imagine which multinational companies is intentionally or knowingly trying to violate this, right? Nobody wants to really do this. They are caught in the middle.
Yeah, let me go to our guest. Let me go to our guest in America. So, Brandon, how was this piece of news perceived in the United States? Are American businesses over there who have been doing business with China or Chinese companies concerned at this moment?
Concerned is a good way to phrase it. The short-term reaction, I think, is, oh, what is this? A lot of people are interpreting this as an immediate sort of tit-for-tat type of move, with the United States putting Huawei on its concern list and citing national security issues. Now China is basically creating a very public corresponding list that doesn't specifically talk about national security, but talks about non-commercial activities or acting in bad faith, as one of my colleagues put it. That list, short-term, I think, is just another chit in the overall negotiations about the trade war. It's another mechanism that the Chinese government can use to put pressure on U.S. economics, U.S. companies. It's a way they can punish people without really punishing them. The concern for me is not so much what does this list do in the next 30 days. This list could be sort of one of those things that disappears from the public consciousness in the next 30 to 45 days if we get some sort of movement in negotiations by the G20 at the end of June. The real problem is, what does this mean long term? This is one of these lists that's going to exist in the background. And even if there's no formal enforcement, just getting your name near the list, getting the list as a suggestion could hurt people's ability to do business. It could hurt governments or other companies inside China wanting to do business with you if they think there's sort of the smell of this list around you. So this list doesn't have to have any formalized impact to create a chilling impact long term on foreign businesses across China doing business.
So, Tim, you had a kind of a smile on your face when you heard that sentence that, the smell of the list could. So, what are we talking about here? It's a deterrent, or it's a kind of a, what do you call that kind of bomb when you throw it at somebody and basically you destroy them with bad smell?
Yeah, I think the problem is the way that the list could be used is so vague that it's not just a deterrent against bad activity, it's a deterrent of getting anywhere close. And let me just add, the spokesperson from the Ministry of Commerce said that not only might you have companies on this list, but you might have individuals. And just today, hearing from other AmCham member companies, there are executives that are saying, does this increase my risk of traveling to China? So I think the deterrent effect is not just deterring bad behavior, it may deter very positive behavior.
Yeah. Well, I was reading some analysis, and actually one scholar said, basically this list came, China learned from the West on establishing such a list. The United States has its own entities list, and the reason seems to be equally murky. Let's say, for instance, the ban against Huawei is that the U.S. government has determined that there is reasonable cause to believe that Huawei has been involved in activities contrary to the national security or foreign policy interests of the United States. I mean, how do you define that?
Well, I agree that that can be defined. I mean, it could be understood very broadly. That notice went on to cite a particular lawsuit filed against Huawei. But I agree that when you get into this area, you create a lot of uncertainty.
Mr. He.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is probably in response to the kind of export control system, right, U.S. has been implementing for decades. Now, with this unreliable entity list, from my own personal perspective, that's actually really raised lots of demands for companies who really have to learn how to communicate with, especially with the Chinese governments. I actually really doubt that the Chinese government intend to punish every single company that sort of have to comply with the foreign laws when it comes to this export control. But I think the government really hope that, hey, maybe some kind of communication needs to be done, so some kind of damage can be mitigated. This is not really the intention to penalize everyone, but this is create an enormous amount of trouble and the challenge for the companies to learn how to communicate with the government, actually on both sides.
Brandon, let me get to you again. What do you think of the fact, actually, you know, this could be just following the United States footsteps, you know, but the United States position seems to have been do as I say, but not as I do. You know, we have our entities list, but you shouldn't have yours. Or has the United States government said anything officially about this?
Not yet. I mean, arguably, you're completely right. The United States has a list. Other countries have lists like this. In theory, because it's been around longer, the United States list that we're talking about has a fairly well-established procedure for what it is. Now, determination on that can be argued, and China's obviously very unhappy with how the determination was reached at Huawei. The concern, though, for this list is it's so new that it's vague. It is intentionally written as vague. It's also written as unreliable entities, not threatening entities, not national security problems. Unreliable can be anything. Unreliable could be culturally unreliable, it could be morally unreliable, it could be commercially unreliable. That broadness is going to create at least near to midterm uncertainty about the future impact this list will have.
All right. Well, I hope the policymakers listen to this conversation and maybe pause and think a little bit more before they really go and establish the list and putting entities on that list. Well, many thanks to my guests here in the studio, Jing, an attorney at the AnJie Law Firm, and Tim Stratford, chairman of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in China, and of course via satellite from Philadelphia, Brandon Blackburn-Dwyer, founder of Grasshopper Strategies. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can look for me on the social media with the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.